Hello and welcome to Melee's Turn Wheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem series chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm a Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapters 9, 10, and 11, Eirika route of Fire Emblem, the Sacred Stones. How is everyone doing today? I am pretty good. It's been non-stop raining for the past few days. It's like on and off raining, but it's been cloudy. I haven't seen the sun in a couple days now, and I think it's supposed to just kind of continue like this for a while. So, unfortunately, that's kind of the state of things right now. I guess it's April, so you know what they say. But hopefully, we get a little bit more Hopefully, we get a little bit more sun. Good start. Good start. Okay. Fuck sunshine. Fuck the sun. Fuck nature. Fuck everything. We're talking about Fire Emblem. Who cares? Who cares about nature? We have Fire Emblem to talk about, guys. So last time I asked you guys who you thought the worst character in the game was, from a gameplay perspective, and I provided a couple characters that I thought personally were good contenders for that title. And let's go ahead and read some of the answers. So at StarCP says creature campaign bonus units, all of them. And that is a fair. I assume that's a joke. I mean, it might not be a joke. You're correct technically, but I think it's fair to say that maybe those guys don't really count. But the creature campaign units are very interesting, actually. I'm excited to talk about them when we eventually get there. I assume that's probably going to be in the final episode because you can't unlock them until after you've already beaten the game. So, but yeah, there's some really cool, interesting units in there, and I don't know how any of them perform gameplay-wise because I've never done the creature campaign enough times to really say. But I mean, obviously, once you actually unlock these guys, the game is over. There's no real content to do after that. So it's just for skirmishes and the ruins and things like that. So, yeah, I think that's fair to say. But a little bit cheeky of a response, if I may say so. At Arrowman850 says Ewan or Ephraim Route Marissa. I think those are both very reasonable answers. And then at Rock. Oh God, is this my first time reading Drano's at Rock Me Amadeus. Oh, there we go. Rock Me Amadeus. Sorry, that took me a second. Drano says, I'm going to argue it's Ewan. 10 levels of investment will get Amelia, a horse, or Marissa to combat readiness, but it takes minimum 20 levels plus a guiding ring to get Ewan staves or summoning. And I think that's fair. I've been thinking about this question a lot, because I don't know who I would consider to be the worst out of the four. I think it's definitely either Amelia, Ewan, or Marissa, and I'm actually going to go as far as to say that I don't think it's Marissa. I think it's probably up in the air between Amelia and Ewan, and I think it's a matter of what do you value more, right? Do you value ease of use, or do you value what they actually provide for you? And once they're actually trained. And I think if you value ease of use, I think Ewan might be a little bit better. The fact that he's able to hit on res and attack from 2 range is a pretty big deal. It makes training him a lot easier than it would be otherwise. For character, I mean, I guess Ross still comes at a point where the enemies are so weak that he can, and he also has the 2 range. He has the hatchet, which the other, I don't know why the other characters didn't get something similar to the hatchet, where it's accurate 1-2 range. I guess, I mean, Ewan already has that, but Amelia maybe could have gotten a personal javelin or something that was more accurate. I think that could have been cool. But obviously once you actually put that investment in, like Drano is saying, it takes a while, and it takes a lot of investment, and your ultimate reward is summoning, which you have Noel for. He comes right out of the gate ready to promote, and you get him in a chapter where you also get a Master Seal, so you could promote him immediately, especially in, I guess, both Eirika and Ephraim route, because in both of those routes, he starts, borderline right next to the house that has the Master Seal for him in it. So, either way, I think Noel's just gonna, be better. And then staves, I feel like there's more for Amelia to do on a horse even if you're already using a couple of paladins, I feel like, the extra rescue utility, or, just high movement. I feel like that flexibility is worth more than your second summoner or your fifth staff unit or whatever. So I think I'm gonna give it to. I think, oh man, that's fucking That's fucking tough. I can't decide. I think when it comes to like actually using these guys, I feel like the one that I want to use the least on most playthroughs consistently is Amelia. I just don't feel like I feel like it's just so hard to get her those levels, because she gets one rounded by fucking everything by the time she joins. She's frail, she doesn't hit very hard. Her stats don't get like significantly better as she gets higher level, because like all the trainees, all of her growth rates are like pretty mediocre. Presumably to counter out the extra levels you get, so they're not like too overpowered, which I think is dumb. Because they should be overpowered if you put that extra time into them. I don't know. Amelia, I'm gonna settle on Amelia. I might change my mind later, especially once we actually get Ewan. And I do plan on using Ewan in this playthrough. Not Amelia, but I do plan on using Ewan. So we're gonna see how that goes for me. I have used Ewan before, and it's both of them. Training both of them is awful. Don't get me wrong. But I just feel like training up Ewan is a little bit more easier. Or a little bit easier, and the reward is definitely not as good, but it's like not like completely terrible either. So Amelia is my vote. I think Amelia is the worst unit in the game. Anyway, that was a very roundabout roundabout way of getting to that. So thanks for everybody who answered on Blue Sky. I didn't get anybody over. Actually, I think I forgot to post the question on Twitter, so that's maybe on me. But thanks for everybody who answered on Blue Sky. This time, I have a very specific question that I want to ask you guys this time around, because we're going to be getting into the route split today. And I have a lot to say about the route split. I have a lot to say about how I think some issues I have with how it was handled. In terms of the way the game kind of pushes you in one direction over the other. So what I want to know, I want to get some data here to back up what I'm saying, or to disprove what I'm saying. That's fine also. So what I want to know this time is, which route did you pick when you played this game for the first time? Was it Eirika route, or was it Ephraim route? And if you feel like explaining your decision, your thought process for that, I would love to hear that. So let me know. At I'm Melee Kirby, Twitter and Blue Sky, or email turnwheelpodcast@gmail.com. Have at it, and let me know what you guys went with. Okay, so with that out of the way, I think we can go ahead and get started on our chapters for the episode. So we're technically the thing we're starting out on is technically not a chapter. The wiki describes it as an interlude, which I think is appropriate name for it. But we're gonna put the music here anyway. We're gonna start off with the interlude, which is called A New Journey. So Eirika and Ephraim have successfully met back up at the end of last chapter, and they are now headed back towards Frelia. Their mission is accomplished, so they need to regroup and decide what they're going to do next. On their way through Seraphu, which, if you remember, is where we met Joshua and Natasha. It's the town right on the border of Rene and Grotto, and it's where Eirika and Ephraim associate a lot of their memories with, between Rene and Grotto as countries and as, two people working together hand in hand. This feels like an appropriate spot to reminisce about their time with Leon. And this is the first time, I believe, that we're meeting Leon. We've heard about him a couple of times. We've heard mentioned that he is the Grotto Prince, but we've never seen him before now. So this flashback gives us an indication on who he is. Generally, he seems to be a pretty, an intelligent and hardworking guy, very kind, very gentle, and he gets along so well. Their dynamic here is so fun. Where Ephraim is the hot-headed one of the group, and Eirika is trying to keep him in line, and Leon's just over here thinking that they're both great and looking up to them and admiring them both a lot. He wants to be strong like Ephraim, and he wants to be. I think he values strength a lot, and that comes up I think a couple times in this, where he sees Ephraim as being this really competent, capable leader, and he wants to be like Ephraim. But they're very insistent, like, no, Leon, you have your own thing going on. You're a lot smarter than me. You're a lot more in touch with people's hearts and minds than I am. So I think that Ephraim definitely feels that. I don't. That Ephraim mentions that he doesn't even want to be king here. He says, like, I don't want to be king. I just want to be a soldier. And they both kind of like shut that down. How ridiculous that is. They talk a little bit here about making prayers to the there's a temple where there's like a flame that has burned for since the Demon King fell or something like that, which I don't think ever comes up again. That's a neat little piece of world building, right? Like, what the fuck is the deal with that fire? Have they been keeping it going like intentionally and it's just never gone out for 800 years, or is it like magically sustained somehow? And does that have anything to do with the Demon King like being gone, and as he's coming back, is that going to be an issue? I think it's nice to have little details that make the world feel a little bit more fleshed out, even if we don't actually get to like learn more about this aspect of it. So they all make prayers to the temple flame, and apparently if you make a prayer there before a journey, it's supposed to come true. I don't. Oh, Eirika's was a secret, which I thought was interesting. Eirika doesn't want to tell them what she wished for, which is noteworthy. I think I don't want to speculate on that right now. I might come back to that at a later point once we see more about. They might even answer this at some point in Eirika Route, or in like the aftermath of Eirika Route. We'll have to see. I kind of doubt it. But I don't know. I think it's interesting. I want to know what she wished for. Ephraim hasn't made his wish yet, but I don't think any of them have made their wish yet. Eirika has, actually, but Ephraim still needs to go and do it, and he says that he's going to wish to become a strong fighter, and they all laugh at him because that's very much like him. And then Leon comes and says that he's going to wish to be like a good, kind leader to his people or something like that, and both of them, say that that's very like him. It's just like, it's very obvious that they have like a really strong established relationship here, and that they all value each other a lot. It's mentioned a couple times in this flashback that Leon really, really wants to be like his father. He thinks his father is like a good, kind, gentle man, but also really strong, really protects his people, and sees him as like the leader that he aspires to be in the future. But he doesn't think that he's going to be able to. He has a lot of confidence issues that come out really strongly here. And so, Eirika and Ephraim spend some time trying to cheer him up a little bit. So that's where the flashback ends. And both of them kind of think for a little bit about like what Leon's doing right now, what his role in all this might be. And Ephraim basically says that like he doesn't think that Leon is in favor of anything that's going on, but he knows that Leon would not have the confidence or the willingness even really to stand up to his father. So if this is what the Emperor wants, then Leon will go along with it. So they're hoping that they can just defeat the Emperor, and that'll help Leon to see reason. And so they move on. After thinking about what Leon might be up to, they continue on their journey back to Frelia. And when they arrive there, they are met by Tana. And then shortly after, Inez shows up. This is our first time meeting Inez. He is the Prince of Frelia. I'm pretty sure we've heard about him before, but we definitely haven't met him yet. He looks like Seto Kaiba, and he talks like Seto Kaiba. He has the attitude of Seto Kaiba. Everybody, this is a really common point of comparison that people make. He's just like this fucking shit-eating asshole, who is like really, really good and really, really cocky about it. And he sees Ephraim as a rival, and he doesn't want to lose to Ephraim. And that comes across as him being like kind of a jackass to Ephraim. They have a fun dynamic. I'm excited to get to the supports for Inez, because I over the course of the next couple chapters, we meet Inez. I guess getting a little bit ahead of myself, we do recruit Inez in this episode, and we learn a little bit more about him. And I just think he's a great character, and I'm excited to read his supports. Hopefully that continues to be true. So they confer with Hayden. If you recall, he is the king of Frelia. And apparently they sent ahead word, presumably after talking to Natasha about it, they sent word right away to Frelia about the potential that Grotto was going around destroying the Sacred Stones. They haven't really confirmed that yet. It's still just speculation, but Hayden did strengthen the defense on the Sacred Stone just to be on the safe side. And at this point, Ephraim introduces Myrrh to everybody, and for some reason, this is the first time that Eirika notices that she has wings. And yeah, so they did a good job of hiding it in the previous. It's pretty fun. In the previous instances where she showed up, I think it was just the end of last chapter and then the beginning of this one, before they do the reveal. Her sprite is like over on the side of the screen, so you can't see the wings in her portrait. But then she moves to the center of the screen, and you can see that she has wings on her back. So Ephraim explains that she is a Manicheet, and a Manicheet is a one of the dragon folk. I guess the Manicheet lore in this game is like slightly different than how it is in other games. They're from like an ancient race of people that exist separately from humans, but aren't quite like monsters or demons either. They're like their own sort of separate thing that not a whole lot of people know about or are aware of. And Myrrh basically reports that she explains that she felt they're very in tune with like the natural forces of the world, and she explains that they felt a powerful wave of dark energy coming from Grotto, a couple months ago or whatever it was, and she decided that she needed to go out and they were gonna like go and warn the other countries, I think is what it was, something like that. But then she got separated from Sala, or I don't know if they explain all that here. But eventually we do find out about her, traveling around to warn the other countries. But either way, we find out here that Grotto has some like weird, freaky, bad vibe shit going on. And as they're sort of sitting with that, they don't even have really a chance to indicate whether they believe it or not. They are interrupted by the news that the Sacred Stone has been destroyed. And everyone's like, what? How? We went out of our way to make sure that it was well defended. And apparently, Grotto went out of its way to send 2 of the 6 generals to personally assault the tower and destroy the Sacred Stones. Which, that by itself is enough evidence. The fact that he would send 2 of their 6 most powerful soldiers, generals, to destroy this thing, specifically to attack the tower and not do anything else. That's enough to sell people on the idea that Grotto is actually trying to destroy the Sacred Stones. That's proof enough for them. We do actually see a cutaway to the scene of Selena. It's Selena and Calic are the 2 that come and attack the tower. We see a cutaway of them, attacking the tower. Grotto kind of like overruns the place. Calic like kills a guy as he's like laying there dying, and Selena gets a little bit mad about that. It's a good scene. I don't really like. I'm starting to get why people don't like Selena. Like where she's like sitting here being like, "Oh man, I can't believe we're doing this. Why would we do such a thing?" But then she doesn't fucking do anything about it. I don't know. I can understand why people are not a fan of her. Not like based General Dussel, but we're getting ahead of ourselves there. So now that Frelia is fully on board with the idea that the Sacred Stones are being destroyed, they all need to figure out what they're going to do next. Their highest priority, obviously, is warning the other countries that their Sacred Stones are going to be destroyed. And so Inez... So here's what's the problem is, right? Because they're not sure that just sending a messenger will be enough to convince the other 2 nations, being Johanna and Rausten, that their Sacred Stones are in danger. And so Inez says, well, if I go, me personally, the Prince of Frelia, they're not going to just ignore that. So I'm going to go ahead towards Johanna, and I'm going to ward them. And Eirika, presumably, thinking the same idea would work well on Rausten, offers to go to Rausten. And, Ephraim, has a little bit of concern about that, but she basically tells him that it's going to be fine. There's going to be no issues. it's a little bit of a bummer that the only way she can convince Ephraim to let her go is by telling her that they're just gonna be on a boat. It's gonna be fine. There's gonna be no issues at all. Whereas I think it would have been cooler if she had been like, no, listen, like I went out of my way to like go to Grotto and help you. Obviously I know like I'm capable. I can help out. I think that would have been a better moment for her than being like, there's not going to be any danger. Don't even worry about it. I don't know. I'm keeping mental tally of how the game treats Eirika because I'm starting to get a little bit annoyed by it, but we'll see. Meanwhile, Ephraim decides that he is going to lead a force directly into Grotto. And the idea being, well, if we just kill Emperor Vigard, then it'll be fine. And we don't even have to worry about the war anymore. The Sacred Stones will be completely safe. There's no better argument than that. And everyone's like, well, you got a point, I guess. So they agree that they're going to divide the labor up that way. Eirika's going to go to Rausten, Inez is going to go to Johanna, and Ephraim is going to go to Grotto to fight Emperor Vigard directly. Which means it's time to pick our route split option. And unfortunately, Inez is not an option in the route split. That would be too based. They thought it would be. They feared that Inez would become the most popular lord in the series. So they had to limit his power a little bit. And he is not an option to go with him to Johanna. Instead, we get to choose here between picking Eirika and heading to Rausten, or picking Ephraim and heading directly into Grotto. And I've been hyping this up for a little while. It's kind of a big deal in this game. It is considered by many to be the biggest thing that sets this game apart from most of the other games in the series, is this route split. This is by far the... Okay, it's not by far the longest, but it is by far the most impactful route split that we've seen in the series up to this point. It is the longest, but it is not by like that wide of a margin. The second longest is only it's not that much longer than the one that we saw in FE6 between Ilya and Sakai. If you included Gaidens, then that one was 5 chapters, and this one consists of 6 chapters. So it is the longest. The FE6 one isn't that much shorter, but on the other hand, 5, 7, and then like the other route split in 6, all of those route splits are significantly shorter. So the FE6 one is kind of an outlier. I think that they were just kind of like a little bit deranged for that one. I actually don't even think that one should have been 5 chapters. I feel like that was maybe a little bit excessive. What I think makes this route split really stand out from the other ones that we've seen up to this point is that it has an impact not just on the chapters that we're going to play for the next 6 chapters, but it is going to have an impact on the rest of the game as well. Whoever we pick here will be considered our main lord for the remainder of the game. That'll be the person who we seize with. That'll be the person who gets the focus in most of the cutscenes, and for that reason, like this does like make a substantial difference on not just these chapters, but also the content that you're going to be seeing throughout the remainder of the game. It also, and I'm not going to explain exactly how now, that's going to come later, but it also like changes a couple of like, okay, I say a couple. It's really like one major aspect of the story after the routes reconvene that I actually really dislike. I dislike that it changes. I think it should be the same between both routes, and I think it should be the better version of the two between both routes. Which I will explain which one I think to be the better version. As we get a little bit further. The route split does also make it stand out among Fire Emblem games that come later. I can't technically say that this is the most expansive route split in the entire series, because you have, if you want to count Fates, you can count that. I think that might be a little bit disingenuous, because at that point you're just playing like 3 entirely separate games, in my opinion. But I think it is fair to consider the 3 houses choice of house to be a route split. And if you do consider that to be a route split, then that is easily the most expansive in the series. However, pretty much no other games. In fact, I'm trying to remember. Do any other games after this, before we get to Fates, even have any route splits at all? I don't think there's any. I think this is the last one that we see for until we get to Fates. I don't think that Shadows of Valentia counts. That's not really like, you're just kind of playing like 2 different stories. Those are like more akin to the parts of Radiant Dawn, I feel like. I really like this concept, right? I think being able to choose who you decide to prioritize, which lord do you wanna be your ride or die. Not only is that a good way of feeling like you're personalizing your experience, which is always fun in these games. I would argue that a lot of these games are built around that aspect of making your playthrough feel distinctly your own. And I've argued that a couple of times on what aspects of the series I think enhance that and which ones I feel like kind of move away from that in ways that I don't like. This is one that I think absolutely enhances it. It feels good to be like, yeah, I picked Ephraim route, and to see other people say, hey, I also picked Ephraim route, or hey, I picked Eirika route, and you're like comparing yourself on that. But it also adds a lot of replay value because, of course, you might be tempted to go back and do a second playthrough, which I think from that perspective, changing aspects of the story even after the route split makes a lot of sense because, you don't replay, maybe some people do, but I would argue you don't really replay FE6 just to see the other route. It's like a really small portion of that game overall, and it doesn't really affect much outside of it. In fact, the story within those chapters is basically the same between the two routes, Ilya and Sakai. In this game, not only is the story within the chapters completely different, but it also changes a lot after the fact. So if you're going back for a second playthrough to see the other route, you don't feel like you're just wasting your time, which is nice. I like that. And I think that it's a really cool way to I think it's a cool way to incentivize people to replay, especially considering how short the game is. You can really tell that they planned for this to be a route split that you like go back and see the other version, which I think is distinct from Three Houses. For comparing route splits, they have gone on record saying that they didn't expect people to go back and replay the game and do the other routes. For some reason, I don't know. That's psychotic to me. I don't know how they could have thought that wouldn't be the case. But whatever. I guess we'll get there. 20 years from now when we get to Three Houses eventually. Here's where the issue comes in, though, right? Because yes, some people are going to replay the game to see the second route, and I think it's planned. You're planned to do that. It's expected that you're going to do that, and you're rewarded for doing so with new content. That's great. However, that's a pretty big commitment. Even playing a shorter game like this, it's a big commitment to go back for an entire second playthrough, especially considering that the first part of the game is going to be basically identical. And this game does have fewer ways to make repeat playthroughs feel distinct. Because unlike most Fire Emblem games, which you can change a lot of things about your team and the characters that you use, this game has a very small cast of characters. I think the smallest in the series. Although I should probably check that at some point because I don't want to just keep saying that and then it's not true. I'm pretty sure it is. So some people might not want to replay the game, and that's fine. But you gotta accept, as a writer, as a designer, you need to understand that some people aren't going to replay the game, and you need to make it so that each route feels distinctly satisfying to play on its own. And I think that one of them does, and one of them does not. I do not think that you can get a full, complete experience with this game playing only Eirika route. I think if it's your first playthrough and you're not sure that you're going to come back for a second one, you should pick Ephraim route. I think that is the only way that this game feels satisfying on a one-time pass. Going through it one time and not coming back to it. I think it feels fine on Ephraim route. I think it feels like a complete whole story with a lot of cool stuff going on. And I think if you play Eirika route and not Ephraim route, you're leaving huge chunks of stuff out of the story. You're missing out on a lot of the better experiences that this story has to offer. And that just feels backwards to me, right? Because think about it. This is why I asked this question at the beginning of the episode. I want to know which route people picked first because I feel like a good amount of people are going to go with Eirika. I don't think it's going to be a majority necessarily. I think people really like Ephraim. I'm pretty sure people, think Ephraim is really cool. Ephraim's a badass. I definitely felt that way. And when I played this game for the first time, I actually went with Ephraim first, specifically because I thought that his mission sounded cooler. Ephraim saying, I'm going to go take the fight to the heart of Grotto, that sort of active approach felt more interesting to me. So I felt like it was a good idea to go with him because I thought I'd be seeing some cooler stuff in the story than I would if I went with Eirika. And that turned out to be true. I think the stuff that Ephraim gets is is a lot better than what Eirika gets overall, in terms of the story content. I think I have to like go back, and once I replay Ephraim route, I guess I'll know for sure. The way I would explain it is that Ephraim's route covers more of the current events of the story, talks about like the villains and stuff that's going on right now. Whereas Eirika's route covers more of like the history and the backstory of the world through the lore, which is interesting in its own way. But like that doesn't scratch the same itch. Like I want to know what's going on with Vigard. I want to know what's going on with Leon. I want to know everything that's happening. And it doesn't help that the changes to the story that come after the route split make it so that the events that play out after Ephraim route are way better and way more interesting than Eirika route. I'm not going to explain why. I'm not going to explain how yet. But the differences in the story between Ephraim route and Eirika route are so pronounced, and Ephraim routes is just better. I feel bad for Eirika route fans. I know there's a lot of people out there who really like Eirika because she's the first lord, right? She's the one that you've grown attached to over the course of this game. Ephraim hasn't been doing shit. Ephraim's been getting himself in trouble. He's been getting himself out of trouble, but he's also been getting himself in trouble. And Eirika's been the one that you've been by her side. You've been seeing her growth and her story over the course of these past 7 chapters or these past 8 chapters. And for me to sit here and be like, there's literally, like, if you're playing this game only once, you should always go Ephraim route every single time. I just feel like that's so shitty because I know people are going to want to go with Eirika. It feels better for a lot of people, I'm sure, to have her stick around as their main lord throughout the game because they like her. They've had the chance to grow attached to her. There is also another aspect of this that it doesn't really factor into people's decision per se because there's no way to know this going in. But Ephraim's route is also the more difficult of the two. And I think it's by like a pretty notable amount. I don't think Ephraim's route is like incredibly hard or anything like that. But I definitely think it's harder than Eirika route. And so from that perspective, if that's the one that you're going with first, then you might be a little bit overwhelmed or feel a little bit underprepared for what those chapters are going to throw at you. I mean, I managed it for my first Fire Emblem game, so it can't have been that hard. But it's, Phantom Ship is difficult. Recruiting the chapter where you recruit Dusel and Cormag is pretty difficult. Those sorts of chapters make it feel like they definitely expected you to already have a little bit of experience with the game, before doing Ephraim route. And I guess you do. We have 8 chapters worth of experience, but I don't know. It feels like they, like, if they were designing this game without a route split and they were going to go like with one and then with the other, it feels like it would very intentionally be structured to have Eirika be first. She's the one that really well. She's the one with the easier maps. She's the one that gives you the lore and the backstory. And then Ephraim route would cover like the current events of the story and everything that's going on right now. That wouldn't really make sense logistically. So I don't think that was ever like a plan that they had. But it almost feels like they expected people to go with Eirika route first and then replay the game and go with Ephraim route. Which is like a very hyper specific way to plan your game around like a way that people play. I don't get why. Maybe that's just my impression. Maybe that it's just a coincidence, or maybe it's not the case at all. Maybe people disagree with me. Maybe they think I'm crazy. I don't know, but it feels like they expected you to play the game twice, and it feels like they expected you to go with Eirika first. And that's just not going to be the case for a lot of people. Some people are only going to play the game one time, and those people are, if they go with Eirika route, they're going to get the worst story. But if they go with Ephraim route first, then they might feel overwhelmed in terms of the gameplay. So it's a little bit of a lose-lose from that perspective. And I'm making it sound like a bigger deal than it really is. I do think the story is a big deal. Like, I think, like, the fact that so little of the cool stuff in Ephraim route is also in Eirika route is a problem. And I really do think that they should have had a little bit more crossover in that regard. Eirika route, I will say that Eirika route has more interesting moments for some of its characters, particularly Joshua and Cormag are the two that everyone agrees get a lot better development and have a lot more interesting things going on for them in Eirika route. So definitely keep that in mind if you like those two characters in particular. I guess we haven't met Cormag yet. Actually, he might have been in one of the cutscenes that we've seen. I'm not 100% sure. Let me take a look at my notes. Actually, did I mention him in my notes at some point? Yeah, no, I don't think we've met Cormag yet in the story. But if you like Joshua a lot, then you might want to go with Eirika route just because he gets to be goated with the sauce in Eirika route, which is pretty cool. But just if that's the only advantage that she has over Ephraim, in my opinion. So yeah, at the end of the day, I would highly recommend going with Ephraim route first if this is your first playthrough. But ultimately, you will be fine as long as you go with the route that, like, if you go with the Lord that you like. If you like both of them, then I would recommend going with Ephraim route. But if you hate Ephraim, if you think Ephraim's a shitty character and you don't like him, it's probably fine to go with Eirika route and just look up the differences on YouTube or whatever. That's all fine. So I don't think this is the end of the world decision or anything like that, but it is. I just think it's a little bit of a bummer, that the route that a lot of people are going to pick first has the worst story by, in my opinion, a pretty wide margin. So that's all. That's I'm done whining about it. I do really like the route split as a concept, and I think it's implemented pretty well. I just think it could have been better. So as for me, obviously we're going to be showing off all the chapters, so we're going to be going for both routes eventually. We're going to be starting with Eirika route this time around. For no particular reason, as I said, I think it feels more like the intended way to start, based on the difficulty of the game. So it just felt like the right decision to me. Also, as I said, we've been sticking with Eirika this whole time, so I'd like to keep going with that. I like to see the rest of the content that Eirika gets in this game. So we're going to be starting with Eirika route and doing the first 3 chapters today, and the second 3 chapters next episode. And then we'll be switching over to Ephraim route to do 3 and 3 on that side as well. And then we will be finishing up the game after that. Basically, I think we'll be doing that in two episodes after the routes reconvene in chapter 15. So after you pick Eirika, if you choose to go with Eirika to Rausten, Kyle and Ford show up, and she's like, "Oh, well, take care of my brother." And they say, "Well, actually, Ephraim's asked us to go with you, because he's going to have basically the entire Frelian army with him to help him out. So yeah, we have no issue. We have no issue going with you. We think it's going to be fine." Eirika has a little bit of concern. She pushes back on it a little bit, but eventually she agrees. The reason that this happens is because, of course, they want to make sure that you have access to every character. There are no route exclusive characters in this game. There are some characters that will join earlier or later, and then in both cases there will be 2 characters that you don't get until the routes reconvene. So in Eirika route, it is you don't get Dusel or Noel until Ephraim shows back up, and then if you go Ephraim route, you won't get Inez or Sala until the routes meet back up. But then some characters join earlier or later. Cormag joins earlier in in Ephraim route. Garrick and Tethys and Marissa all join earlier in Eirika route. So you'll be able to get all the characters no matter what, although it might make a difference in when you're able to get them, how quickly you're able to start giving them levels and things like that. So that might be a factor as well if you're playing this game and you know what characters you want to use. It might influence what route you decide to go with. So out of all the characters that we've recruited so far, the only character that we're losing access to right now is Ephraim, which is good. So all that effort that we put into training up Ford will be put to good use. He's still, at this point, he still had base strength for me. I think I gotta give him the energy ring. He's really, really bad for me right now, guys. He's so fucking bad. I'm having a really hard time training Ford. Even after a promotion, he's not one rounding anything, basically. He's not even doubling that much. So yeah, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Once Kyle and Ford resolve things with Eirika, we are officially allowed to start chapter 9, which is called The Distant Blade. So we're sent back out to the map screen, and you can see that our path is going to take us north towards a port in Frelia that presumably is going to have a boat that's going to take us to Rausten. However, there is a couple of things we have to note about the map screen. First of all, we're given access to skirmish battles. Sometimes monsters will appear on the world map, and you can go and fight them if you want to. These will take place in the same maps that we fought on previously. Like if monsters show up on the Zaha Woods tile, then when we go there and fight, it'll be in the same map that we recruited Archer and Loot and all them. The only real noteworthy thing about any changes to the map is that some of them are set in like towns and stuff. Like I think a few of them are in like Seraphu or like the port where we later recruit in Ephramet where we recruit Dusel and stuff like that. And in those instances, the villages are destroyed. So I think the implication is supposed to be that like monsters are ravaging the countryside and like towns and villages that you visit before might like just have been razed to the ground by monsters, which is very unfortunate to think about. But I don't know if we're meant to take it literally. I mean, it's just there so that we aren't able to visit the houses again for rewards, I guess. But I don't know why they don't just just have them be closed. Like, why do they have to be destroyed? It's pretty awful if you think about it. The other thing that we gain access to now is the Tower of Valni, which works similarly to skirmish battles. They are infinitely repeatable, optional battles with monsters that we can do as many times as we want. This is a great way to grind up low-level characters. This is the first time in this podcast that we are seeing infinitely repeatable battles. This is something that the series will come back to multiple times over the course of the series. We see it again in an Awakening, and then Fates in some routes. And I believe Echoes has a shitload, 3 houses. Engage also has skirmishes, yeah. So once we hit Awakening, it's going to be like every game that this is happening. But this is the first time that the series has seen it in a while. Technically, it hasn't been in since Gaiden. So, we haven't seen it at all in this podcast yet because we didn't do Gaiden. The thing about the Tower of Valni is that those are separate, distinct maps. I don't remember most of them being any good, but they are their own distinct maps. So we will actually be talking about them, but not this episode. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to wait for the entirety of the Tower of Valni to be accessible to us, because we're only given access to the first floor here, and then as we progress through the story, we're given access to the other floors. I don't remember, let me check how many there are. So there are 8 floors in the Tower of Valni. We unlock the first one after Chapter 8, once we leave after making our route split decision, and then we unlock an additional floor for every chapter we complete, regardless of the route that we're on, right up until Chapter 15, where after beating Chapter 15, we unlock the final 2. So I'm looking at some of these maps right now, and some of them honestly look kind of cool. There's some chests and stuff that have items in them. I think it's mostly just like shitty items in gold. But I'm pretty sure the final boss of the Tower of Valni has the chance to drop like a stat booster or promotion item. So I'm excited to get to that and talk a little bit about that, because it looks kind of cool, to be honest. The later floors don't even look like training necessarily. They kind of seem like little like mini gauntlets. But we shall see. There is also the Lagdao Ruins, which we'll be covering later. Those don't unlock until closer to the end of the game. So we'll talk about those when we have access to them. Until then, though, Tower of Valni, I haven't even gone into the Tower of Valni yet. I might, when I get Ewan, I want to try to see if I can train up Ewan without using them, but obviously that's what they're there for, so I'm not going to stop myself from using them. A lot of people choose not to grind in Sacred Stones, and that's completely fine, but I do think that it's maybe a little bit, I don't know, like it's there for a reason. Use it if you want to, I guess. Don't let anybody give you a hard time about it. Okay, now, finally, without further ado, we can actually get into Chapter 9 proper. So in order to get to Rausten, the most direct route would take Eirika across the ocean. If you look at a map of Magvel, you can see that you can cut across the northern coast, and Rausten is the northeast area on the map, so just cutting across the northern sea there would get her there pretty quickly. So she's headed to a port, and the port is located in Carcino. Carcino is a country that was flagged up at the beginning of the game and hasn't really come up in a while. But it is an emerging country that was established fairly recently. It sounds like they don't have a sacred stone, but they're ran by like a council of merchants, I guess, something like that. And that's where the port is located. And Carcino and Frelia are allies, so Eirika's not really like there's no real concern here that there's going to be any trouble. Everybody just assumes that it's going to be a smooth journey. However, unfortunately, that turns out to not be the case. We get a cutscene, an enemy POV cutscene of Vigard sort of divvying out tasks to his generals. He orders, what does he say? I think Dusul is supposed to go like fight Ephraim or something like that. And that's something that we're going to pick up on in Ephraim route because that becomes relevant later. But for Eirika route, the only thing that really matters here is that Glenn is instructed to go after Eirika. I believe Volter is instructed to take Ephraim, and Glenn is instructed to go after Eirika. So we know that Glenn is going to be coming for Eirika at some point. That flags that up as something to keep our eyes out for later. Then we cut back to Eirika, and Eirika is being followed by Tana. Tana has decided that she has had enough of sitting around, and she says that you and Ephraim and my brother are all out there risking their lives, and I want to join up with you because I refuse to be the only one who sits inside just waiting to hear what happened. And so after a little bit of convincing, she agrees to Eirika agrees to let Tana tag along. So we'll talk about Tana when we actually get to the map. Tana does join in Chapter 9 on both routes, but her joining situation was a little bit different in Chapter 9 of Ephraim route, so we'll talk more about that obviously when we get there. So Eirika arrives at the Carcino port. They say the name of the port. I can't even fucking remember what it is. It's like Port Chris, I think, Kris, something like that. And who should be there but La Rochelle, a character that we met back in Chapter 4. She was talking about, like, smiting demons or something. And she's here with her retinue of Dazla and Renak. And she's talking to Eirika, just kind of making small talk. And they say that that there's definitely... You're not going to be able to find a ship to go to Rausten because there are rumors that a ghost ship is sailing the seas and accosting any ships that attempt to travel across the oceans. And the reason that that's noteworthy is because we do actually encounter that ghost ship on Ephraim route. I really like that. If you are playing Eirika route first, then it flags up the ghost ship as being something to interest you in possibly, seeing the content on the other route. Or if you're coming off of having played Ephraim route, then you're like, oh, hey, I know what they were talking about. You get to point at the screen, and it's really cool. So La Rochelle is actually in a similar predicament because she... is going to Rausten as well, and she decides that she's going to take the land route and suggests that they do the same. So La Rochelle dips out and leaves Eirika, and they're like, well, we should probably at least like try to figure out what the hell's going on. However, before they're really able to get any further into this process, they are attacked by, I guess, like bounty hunters. They're hoping to kill Eirika and turn her bounty into Grotto. And so that's the conflict for this chapter. We have to deal with bounty hunters in this port. And that's where the chapter begins. So our goal here is to... I actually should double check. I don't know if this is a route map or a kill boss map. But either way, getting to the boss is going to require killing most of the enemies anyway. Let me just check real quick. Okay, yeah, so it's a route map. However, by the time you get to the boss, you'll have killed most of the enemies anyway, so it's not like a huge deal. There are some reinforcements that might be a little bit frustrating to deal with, but unlike in some later chapters, including some ones that we're going to see, I don't think this episode, but next episode, unlike some later chapters in this game and in the series, you don't really run into the issue where you're like about to beat the map and then you get like, oh no, there's a bunch more reinforcements that you have to beat and that's going to drag the map out. It's pretty straightforward to just like carve your way through to the boss and kill all the enemies along the way without much fanfare. The main thing that makes this chapter interesting to me is that there are pirates that are going after villages. And quite frankly, these are some of the hardest villages to safely obtain in any of the games we've looked at so far, I think. At least for me personally, you need to be like moving Seth like full tilt to save the one on the left. And if you don't, like if your Vanessa is dead, I think part of the reason they give you Tana in this map is to give you another option if you don't have Vanessa or you haven't been training Vanessa to save the village across the water. There's a village directly below where you start, but it's across some water that most of your units can't cross. So unless you have like Pirate Ross or a flyer, you're not going to be able to get to that house before a pirate shows up there to destroy it. And the houses in this game give you some good shit. The one on the left gives you a Draco shield, and the one on the bottom gives you a rapier, which is good, because by this point, if you've been using Eirika a fair bit, her rapier is probably running pretty low on uses. And then if you manage to save both of the villages until the end of the chapter, then you will get an angelic robe. So there are some really valuable reasons to keep these villages safe. So you're definitely going to want to do that. And Tana cannot 1v1 these pirates. Like a trained Vanessa probably can, especially if you happen to promote her into a Falcon Knight, allowing you to use swords, then she's going to deal with these guys no problem. But like a Vanessa that doesn't have a lot of experience into her, or that who hasn't promoted yet, or if you're using Tana for whatever reason, then these pirates are going to be a real problem. And it took me multiple tries to get through this chapter while saving that village. Because she just she takes a lot of damage from these guys, and there's archers down by where you can't just have her fly to the house and end her turn on the house tile, because then the archers are going to kill her. So you got to make sure that you're in position where you can fly onto the village and then canto off, or I guess you can try to like kill the pirates and maybe like bait them away to buy yourself a little bit more time to get there with like cavaliers, but that's still going to take you a while because there's like a lot of reinforcements. This is like a pretty like challenging map, not necessarily to beat, but to get the side objectives on. I actually think it's a pretty fun, challenging map overall. This is also, I believe, where we're seeing our first promoted enemy that isn't like a boss. And that is the sniper over here on the top left. I like the idea of making it a sniper too. Specifically, we this is something that I try to draw attention to as we go through these games. Is when do we start to see promoted enemies? And having the first promoted enemy that we see that's just like a normal enemy be a sniper, I think makes a lot of sense, because snipers can be very dangerous. They can be very accurate. They attack from 2 range. Obviously, they do super effective damage to flyers. So there's a lot of reasons why a sniper could cause problems for you. But they're also like, relatively easy to gang up on if you get the initiative on them. So I think that it strikes a good balance between being like a good scary, like, oh hey, this guy's like tough, don't mess around with him, while also being like not you don't run the risk of players not being strong enough to take them on, which is like a real possibility at this point. Your guys are still like relatively weak. You've only had the option to promote, like, I think we've only gotten like 3 promotion items at this point, and you might not have used them all already. So anyway, let's talk about Tana. So Tana is this game's second Pegasus Knight, and she's good. She is not as good as Vanessa, not just by merit of joining later, but she replicates a lot of the same things that Vanessa is able to do. I believe that her like strength growth is a little bit higher and her speed growth is a little bit lower, but it's not by a substantial amount, like not enough to really make any notable difference. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so she only joins at level 4, so only a few levels higher than base Vanessa, all those chapters ago. So she's a little bit, she's definitely like a fun growth unit to train up. It's a little bit tricky to use her on this map because of all the archers and all the axe using enemies. So I think maybe they could have done a little bit more to make her game feel a little bit better. But I think it's still mostly fine. She's still pretty fun to use. And then compared to Vanessa, her strength isn't even like that much higher relatively. She has 7 base strength and 13 base speed, despite being 3 levels higher than her, and not joining so much later. So I think that most people, if you're only going to pick one, obviously people are going to prefer Vanessa. But if you like Tana, either because you think she's a more fun character, or maybe you like using Pegasus Knights to have like a little bit more strength to speak of, you might enjoy training her. I did make a mistake. Her speed growth is actually higher than Vanessa's, only by 5%, and her strength growth is 10% higher than Vanessa's. So like over the course of the game, that's not going to make like a huge amount of difference, but it is the strength. That is, the speed is going to like barely matter at all, but the strength might end up being like a difference of a few points by the end of the game, which is pretty nice. Oh, and they also had her join with a heavy spear and a javelin. And I mean, you do have access to her in the preps menu, so you can give her better items in the prep screen. But it's just like really weird to me that you can't like that. Like, why did they think that was a good idea for her to start with? She gets weighed down so badly by both of those items, and she's like gonna be fighting against enemies that she does really poorly against. So I don't know why they wanted her to feel like complete dog shit to use in this map. I don't know what they were thinking about that. There is a fun little piece of dialogue you get here if you visit the house on the left. Renak is in there. Renak is one of the guys that we saw earlier with La Rochelle, and he basically makes it clear that he has been trying to give her the slip, and so he's hiding in this house for her to go away, and doesn't want you to tell her that she's in there. So he is. We see in both routes that Renak disappears from her and has to be recruited again later. But in this, I believe this is the only the only of the two routes where we actually get to see like that like formally happen, where we see them together and then we see him like breaking off from her. So that's pretty fun. I like Renak a fair bit. He's a fun character. 5 turns into the map, we are, I mean, there's reinforcements spawning, like, almost all the time from turn 2 all the way to turn 5. But turn 5 specifically, we get a particularly noteworthy reinforcement, because it is Amelia. We have Amelia on our hands here, and she is a recruitable character. You can recruit her by talking to her with Franz or Eirika. In this route only. In Ephraim route, you can only recruit her by talking to her with Franz. But in this map, you can recruit her with Eirika as well. It's pretty easy to get down there in time. Well, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So yeah, she starts pretty far away from where you guys start out. However, especially if you're using Franz, it's pretty easy to just run up to her and have him fight some guys and recruit her. She will suicide off of you if you're not careful, so be very careful about that. I ended up standing there. I don't remember. Yeah, it was with Nami. I ended up standing there and letting her like poke me a few times with Nami, or poke Nami a few times so that she couldn't like kill herself. Which is pretty funny that I had to make that consideration. But she only has 4 move, so it's very easy to just like ride up to her from outside of her range with Franz, or even if you're using Eirika, you can stand outside of her range and then walk up to her next turn. Now, here's the interesting thing about Amelia, specifically on Eirika route, is that in Eirika route, if you take too long to recruit her, she will leave the map and come back later, and you can recruit her in a later chapter. This is different from Ephraim route. In Ephraim route, she shows up in Chapter 9, and you can only recruit her there. You either recruit her or you kill her. There's no in between. I guess you could technically, I'm pretty sure that's a C's map, so you could just leave her alive for some reason if you wanted to do that. I don't know why you would do that, but it's probably going to be recruiter or killer. In this map, she runs away after, I think it's like you have a very like substantial amount of time before she runs away. I want to say it's like Chapter 10 or like turn 10 or turn 12, something like that. It's pretty late into the map, so you really don't have to worry about this from a practical sense. This only really matters if you're like super duper turtling the map. However, there is a reason that you might potentially want to exploit this on purpose, and that is because Amelia in this chapter joins with the Speedwing, and you can steal the Speedwing off of her with Colm if you want to, and then when she leaves and then comes back in a later chapter, I believe it's chapter 12 or 13, she will have a Speedwing in her inventory again. So you can potentially get 2 Speedwings this way, if you choose to not recruit her here and instead steal her Speedwing off of her and let her run away. That is what I opted to do. That is a pretty fun strategy that you can employ if you choose to. So yeah, I'm gonna be you can cheat and get the extra Speedwings off of her that way. However, you can recruit her here, and if you want to actually use her on your team, you're definitely going to want to recruit her as early as possible. So I am going to assume that you're recruiting her here and talk about her in gameplay for those of you who want to know what her deal is. So Amelia is our second trainee unit. After Ross, who we got all the way back in chapter 2. Amelia is here, and she fills a very similar role. She is a level 1 recruit, which is a sort of tier 0 class that exists below the regular classes. And when she hits level 10 in her trainee class, then at the start of the next battle, she will have the option to promote into either a cavalier or a knight, like an armor knight. So what the fuck? Why did they, who looked at this and thought that this was like a decision that was even like worth giving to the player? Why on earth would anyone possibly think that it's a good idea to be like, yeah, okay, so you can put her on a horse, you can give her 7 movement and swords, and give her a little bit more access to the weapon triangle for better control of enemies, or you can make her into an armor knight with the benefit of like an extra point of defense. I think that's like the only change between the two. That like the only positive change for knight. Over promoting into Cavalier, and it's absolutely insane. This is by far the most one-sided. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. That's a little bit of a bold claim, but I don't think that a lot of people are going to disagree with me. This is by far the most one-sided choice in terms of promotion options. Why would you ever go knight? Now there are some people who like to make Amelia into a knight, and I should really stress. I think I mentioned this when I was talking about the promotion options in previous episodes. It's totally okay if you want to make Amelia a knight, if you think that she looks cool, if you like her red armor, or you just want to use a general and you didn't feel like training up Gilliam because you didn't feel like Gilliam was a very interesting character. That's all fine. Like there's no reason you can't do that. Just like from a gameplay perspective, it's so one-sided. Like knight is a terrible class. Knight is like a terrible class by itself, let alone when you're making it a mutually exclusive option with a Cavalier, which is one of the better classes in GBA Fire Emblem. So yeah, I don't think I need to, like, people probably already know. I'm probably preaching to the choir a little bit on this, but still worth talking about, I think. Now, in terms of whether or not Amelia is like, well, in terms of like Amelia's usefulness, I guess. Obviously, if you've played this game, if you're familiar with like the consensus around this game, you know that Amelia is not a very good unit. I mean, even at the beginning of this episode, I said that I considered her to be the worst unit in the game. Although, as I said, I do feel like that's a little bit up in the air. I think you can make some arguments about who's better between her and Ewan, or maybe even Marissa. Oh, sorry, it's 2 points of defense to promote her into a knight. That's my bad. That's extremely important to keep in mind, that you'll get +0 defense by promoting her into Cavalier, and +2 if you promote her into a knight. So don't sleep on it. That's going to be really helpful considering that she has a 30% defense growth. What were they thinking? Yeah. So Amelia is. I mean, like, I like Ross. I think people are starting to realize that maybe Ross isn't that good either. But I think he's definitely like considered to be the best out of the 3. And the reason for that is because you have a lot of time in the early game when there isn't a lot of like, you have free deployment slots for him. You don't have to purposefully choose to keep him on the map in most instances. I mean, you do kind of, but like it's pretty easy to make the choice between him and like benching Gilliam or Naomi or whatever. So you can definitely make the argument that like he earns a deployment slot. He's pretty decent against the enemies in the early game. He has the hatchet, which allows him to do decent 1-2 chip damage, and maybe like come in and get some kills for experience reliably. And Amelia doesn't have that. She has no special weapon like the hatchet that she can use to get experience safely. She either has to attack at one range and risk enemy retaliation, or she has to use a javelin, which is very inaccurate and weighs her down a lot. So she's not going to be able to secure kills very easily. So it's a pain in the ass to use her. It really is. It's just not. It's not worth it. No matter who you, no matter, even if you like using Amelia, like you have to admit that it's a pain. And I like Amelia. I've used her in multiple playthroughs. I've used her as a general. I've used her as a paladin. I don't know if I've ever used her as a great knight, but that sounds kind of fun. I kind of want to try that out at some point. So I like using Amelia too. I enjoy using her from time to time. But she's just so like it's just such a hassle. You have to go out of your way. You do now have access to the Tower of Valni, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, right? Where it's like obviously you can't factor that into her viability, right? Because if you're gonna give her experience in the tower, you know who else you can give tower experience? Seth. You know who else you can give tower experience? Franz. And it's like so if you're gonna look at it from that perspective, then yeah, it's not really like the grinding isn't a reason that she's actually a good unit secretly and people just sleep on her, but it is something to keep in mind if you want to use her. And like that's fine, you know. No one should feel like maybe wasting 10 minutes on a map to get her up to level 10 is like a complete waste of time. Because if you want to use her, then that's completely fine. I kind of lost track of where I was going with that, but my point is that if you like, it should be considered a factor in the fact that like it makes using her easier, like, and that's like even if we don't want to talk about that from a unit viability perspective, that's just nice from a quality of life perspective, like it's nice to be able to train up weaker units if you want to. So I think that that's an aspect of this game that I really enjoy is, yes, it doesn't make them necessarily good units, but the game gives you a lot of flexibility in using the units that you want to use, which is great. So you get to the end of the chapter, you kill all the guys, and you manage to capture one of the enemies, and he spills the beans that the person who put out this bounty is one of the Carsino councilmen. Apparently Carsino has completely betrayed Frelia. This guy doesn't know any more details than that. He just says like, Carsino wants you dead or whatever. And so they let him go and they say, okay, well, now that we know that Carsino is, openly rebelling against Frelia, we need to go help Inez because Inez was going to take the land route through Carsino to get to Johanna. So we got to make sure that he's okay. And so they run off to go help him with that. And that's the end of the chapter. Next up, we have chapter 10, which is called Revolt at Carsino. As I said, the thrust of this chapter is that we have to go help out Inez against the people from Carsino who are going to, stab him in the back or whatever. We do get an enemy POV scene of Glenn and Cormac talking. They are brothers, Glenn being one of the generals one of the good generals, I guess you could say, one of the earlier generals along with Selena and Dussel. He's talking with his younger brother Cormac, and he indicates that he doesn't feel like Eirika is like I'm trying to remember. So Vigard has given Glenn the order to capture Eirika, saying that she murdered a whole bunch of innocent villagers in Carsino, and that, Glenn has to go stop her. And Glenn doesn't really buy that. He has met Eirika before. It was only once, but he did meet her, and he doesn't feel like she would be the type of person to do such a thing. So he's starting to feel like a little bit put off. He's like, why, if this isn't true, why would Vigard lie to me about this? Like, what's going on here? Then Volter comes around and starts talking shit to them. Apparently Volter did used to be a general. We knew vaguely that he was like in the military before, but now we do find out that he was one of the three generals. I think it's not until later where we find out exactly that he was the third alongside Glenn and Dussel, but we do find out that he was he was previously a general, before he was cast out for slaughtering innocents, I think is what it was. You wretch, you were cast out from the army for mistreating civilians. So he's kind of a piece of shit. So there's some conflict there. Clearly, Glenn does not like this guy, understandably so. Cormac tries to stand up for his brother, but it doesn't really get very far. But that's where we leave that off for now. Cutting back to Now Inez, we get to see Inez, and he's hanging out with a couple of guys there. Presumably, I guess not presumably. He does say that they're mercenaries. I just don't remember exactly when he says that. Garrick and Tethys are their names, and they're helping him. They're standing against Carcino, and things are looking pretty bad. They're surrounded. They're pinned down, and it's looking like things are pretty bad. Inez, I really like Inez in these chapters. He's so cool. So he looks over at them and realizes that they're in a hopeless situation, and so he tries to fire them to get out of there safely, and says, I'm not going to pay you if you stick around. But Garrick and Tethys, see pretty. He's being very transparent about what he's trying to do, and they realize that, and they feel that they want to stand by his side because they like the cut of his jib or whatever. So they're gonna keep fighting with him, and he kind of chastises them for being stubborn. He says, Inez has a line here that I really like, where he says, "You and I are not the same. You're a commoner. I'm Frelia's heir. We of noble birth do not shirk the duties to which we are born." So I like this characterization for Inez because it shows that, like, yes, he thinks very highly of himself. Yes, he's very cocky, very arrogant, but he also, like, with that, ability that he truly believes himself to have, he also believes that he has additional responsibilities that most other people don't. So, he's still a cocky, arrogant asshole, but at least he's going to step up to the plate when it matters, which is pretty cool. I like that for him a lot. I think Inez is a really fun character here. Thankfully, this is about the time that Eirika shows up, and they're going to go rescue Inez and the others. So this chapter is sort of built around you going to rescue Inez. He starts off as a green unit alongside Garrick and Tethys, a little bit far away from your starting position. And then the ultimate goal is to make your way up to the boss, whose name is Pablo, and you kill him and seize the gate. So you kind of have to, I like this chapter because it asks you to make a decision about what you want to prioritize. I mean, obviously, Inez, Garrick, and Tethys are in danger. However, they can hold out for a little bit. So it's possible that you might want to prioritize clearing out the enemies on your way to Pablo so that you can make that a little bit easier later down the road. Or you can send the majority of your forces down to help Inez and give the enemy a little bit more time because, eventually reinforcements start to come in. So that might make actually attacking Pablo a little bit later on a bit harder. Or you can split your army and try to do both, and possibly, this chapter isn't like super easy, so there were definitely a couple times where I felt like I was spreading myself a little bit thin, but that's neat. It gives you an option to figure out what you want to prioritize and potentially suffer the consequences of prioritizing, the wrong thing at the wrong time. So I think that's pretty cool. I like this chapter a fair bit. And the issue really is that there's not much more to it than that. There aren't really any side objectives. There are a few recruitable characters, not just the ones that I already mentioned, but there's also a recruitable enemy. We'll talk about all of them in a minute. But first, let's just go over these new guys that we get. Once we get Eirika to Inez, I'm pretty sure, I haven't checked this. I guess I should. I should do my due diligence. I would be absolutely shocked if Tana could not recruit Inez. Let me see here. Yeah, okay, she can. So that might be a little bit better. There's a ballista and some archers in the vicinity, so that might be a little bit scary and a little bit dangerous to have Tana be the one to do it, but she is faster than Eirika in terms of movement speed, so she can get to Inez a little bit more quickly. So that's something. And then Inez can in turn recruit Garrick and Tethys. You can do this in basically any order. You can recruit Garrick, who can then recruit Tethys, or you can recruit Tethys, who can then recruit Garrick. Whatever you want to do. The conversations are also slightly different, depending on the order that you do things in, which is cool. I like to see the different conversations. The one for Tethys recruiting Garrick is particularly good. I like that one a lot. But yeah, so let's talk about all these guys in terms of gameplay. So Inez is a pre-promoted sniper, and his stats are pretty good. There's not really a whole lot to say about this guy. The main issue, obviously, is that he is a sniper, and snipers are bad. They cannot retaliate on enemy phase to most enemies, so, you can't really have him do a whole lot of frontlining, which is a little bit unfortunate because his stats definitely make him a decent candidate for that job. He's a little bit weak, like, on the strength side, so he might have trouble one-rounding some middle of the road enemies in terms of bulk. However, he does join with a sword or with a bows at base, which is good because it means that he can use the silver bow at base, and in fact, he has one in his inventory. So that's pretty good. So he can make up a little bit for power in using better weapons. I think he's perfectly serviceable. He's a pretty fine mid-game filler unit. I don't necessarily recommend using him for the entire game, but he can get the job done. And then, if you want to, he is a perfectly viable option. Okay, and the next is Garrick. Garrick is a mercenary, and the really cool thing about Garrick is that he joins at level 10 with a hero crest in his inventory. So if you want to, you can recruit him and then immediately promote him, which is awesome. And his stats are really good. So he definitely, is able to get away with an early promotion. He's going to have the stats after the promo bonuses to still kill enemies very reliably. In terms of, this is our first time seeing the mercenary promotion options. He can choose between a ranger and a hero. Now, I think that this choice is pretty even, because I think both of them offer pretty distinct advantages. It's just a matter of what you prioritize. I think most people, myself included, tend to come down on hero being the better option, but I don't think it's by that much. I think it's by a little bit, because if you care about mobility, if you like the ability to rescue drop people, if you think Kanto would be a good skill for him to have, like all that stuff are viable reasons to pick Ranger for him. And of course he gets access to bows, which is not like particularly useful, but can have its own niches, especially in some of the later chapters that have like flying monsters and things like that. It could be handy. But then of course the main thing about hero is that he gets access to hand axes at base, and he's just like really, really good at sitting in the middle of enemies and throwing hand axes at them and killing them all, because he's really bulky and pretty fast and really strong. He's one of the best candidates for the speed wings because he struggles to double some things at base. He doubles a lot, but he doesn't double everything. So if you give him a speed wing, it tremendously increases the amount of things that he is able to attack twice, which is pretty good. Garrick is considered to be one of the best gameplay units in the entire game. Like in terms of combat units, I think he is like probably second only. I mean, not say he's like behind the Cavaliers and the Flyers probably. But those guys are all so strong that it's not really like it doesn't make a substantial difference. And when I say Flyers, I mean like Vanessa and Cormag. I do think he's probably better than Tana. But I guess your mileage may vary on that. I guess it depends on how much you value flight. And then finally, Tethys is a dancer, and she's a dancer. You can't really get much simpler than that. She is able to refresh her units, have them move a second time, which can be very useful in a variety of different circumstances. I don't think I have it in me to explain for like the fourth or fifth time why dancers are good, because if you are listening to this podcast, I assume you are familiar enough with Fire Emblem to understand why dancers are kind of like broken and why they're like considered S tier units in like every game. But Tethys is no exception. I think that she's extremely good. I think the only real reason that Tethys might be like a little bit worse than in some other games is that the game itself is so easy that like having like a lot of action economy on player phase is not as valuable as it is in some other games. But I don't think that makes it like not still super valuable. You know what I mean? So she's fantastic. Coming up from the south, I think we actually see a cutscene indicating that she was like a famous mercenary or something like that. We see a cutscene of a spooky red-haired girl. I say spooky because people around her seem to be afraid of her. Because she's very quiet, very stoic, and apparently she has a reputation of being a great mercenary. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I don't really see where that comes from, but I don't remember. Oh, I think she probably mentions Garrick by name, something like that. There's some indication that she knows Garrick, and so that's your indication that you're able to recruit her by talking to her with Garrick. Her name is Marissa, and she is a Myrmidon. So you do that. She comes up and actively, attacks where Garrick and everybody else is. So it's pretty easy to do. And she joins. Now, here's the thing about Marissa, is that she is in every way I maybe not like literally. I think she might have like a little bit more res and luck or something like that. But in every stat that actually matters, she is notably worse than Joshua, the character who joins 5 whole chapters before she does. And that is the better case scenario for her because in Ephraim Route, she only joins in chapter 12. So, 7 whole chapters after Joshua. But even on Eirika route, where she joins a little bit earlier, she's still extremely weak. And not only that, she has D swords. She can't even use the Killing Edge at base. So she is, I mentioned her previously as being another contender for the worst. The worst gameplay unit in the entire game. She's just awful. She's just so awful. So we're gonna be using her. And I forgot to mention that we were also using Tana. I really like Tana. I think she's a fun character, and I want to use her. But we're using Marissa as well. This one I think was just like I just wanted to use a Swordmaster, and I used Joshua a lot. So I just kind of wanted to mix things up a little bit. I do not recommend you use Marissa. I think that she's out of all these characters that I'm using for this playthrough. I'm using a lot of really bad characters this time around. And I think out of all the ones that I've started using so far, she's definitely the one where I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I inflicting this torture on myself? She sucks. She's really, 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 really bad. So don't use her. But if you're deranged like me and you feel like using a Swordmaster and you don't want to use Joshua for the 8th time, use Marissa. This kind of like goes into an issue that I have with this game in general is because the cast size is so small. It feels like the cast feels a little bit more personal, and they can maybe spend a little bit more time theoretically making each character feel a little bit more unique, which I think is an argument that you can make. I think people who really like the cast of this game make that argument. That it's a very small, intimate cast, and that you get to know each of them really well over the course of your playthrough, and that's all fine and good. The issue that I have is that it feels like when I'm replaying this game, there's so little variety in who I'm able to use, and I think that is like compounded by the fact that like if you look at the options that you have, right? Like if you want to use a Swordmaster, your options are the good, great, fantastic unit. I mean, he's not like all that good, I guess, but the pretty good unit that you're going to be using like every single time you want to use a Swordmaster. He joins early, he's cool, everybody likes him. Or the shitty, garbage, terrible unit that everybody hates and thinks is boring and bad in gameplay. So like I don't feel very rewarded for stepping outside of my comfort zone, and it leads to the situation where every time I'm playing Sacred Stones, it feels like I'm using the same cast of characters over and over and over again. Like there's only so many times that I can use Franz before I want to, before the dark thoughts start entering my brain and I want to use Amelia instead. It's just not very fun for me to like branch out and diversify my team in this game, but it's also not fun to use the same guys over and over again, right? So I wish that they were a little bit more, they give you a little bit more variety in your options, I guess. FE7 had a similar problem with some types of units. Like there was only one Dark Mage in FE7. So it felt a little bit, you couldn't really step outside your comfort zone there either. And this game is a little bit better in that regard. It has 2 potential Dark Mages. It has, Noel obviously is the only one you get out of the box, but then Ewan can also become a Dark Mage. So it's not like FE7 was completely immune from this problem. But I do think that it's a little bit more exacerbated in, FE8. I think the trainees help by giving you a little bit more variety in like the types of classes that you can get. Ross being the only way to get a pirate early on in the game is pretty fun, and that adds a little bit more of his unique identity to his character. But yeah, it's just something I mentioned a couple times. Or that's something that I've wanted to mention a couple times, is that it's just like I'm using a lot of dog shit units this time around, but the reason that I'm doing it is because they're just like there's like not any other fucking options, I just got to use the same team that I've always used every single time, or I gotta get a little bit spicy and use like Ford and Marissa and Garcia. Although honestly, I will say I think Garcia is pretty good. I think Garcia is just like kind of a good unit. But maybe I'm getting a little crazy there. We'll see how I feel about him this playthrough. But I I'm not sure when I'm going to talk about this. I have been doing another series marathon alongside this podcast series, and I finished FE8 in it recently, and used Garcia in that, and that was really fun. I like using Garcia a lot. I'll probably talk about that at some point. Maybe I'll make it when I reach the halfway point, which would be FE11. So when I reach the end of FE11 in that series marathon, I'll let you guys know what I've been cooking up, because it's fun and I want to talk about it, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself before I even make it very far. Okay, that's pretty much it for this chapter. I think the approach to Pablo is a little bit scary because there's like ballista archers there that can be threatening. There is an arena in this chapter for some reason. I don't really know why. I guess again maybe they wanted to include it as an option for people who didn't feel comfortable using the tower or skirmishes, or maybe it just felt like a sort of thing that they had to have because the other games had arenas. I'm not really sure, but. Oh, and it's a way to grind money more efficiently too, I guess, if you want to do that. So we reach this. I don't know exactly what this place is supposed to be. I don't know if it's like Pablo's mansion or like it's somebody's mansion. I think I don't know. It's some important building. And we find out that not every single person in Carcino, like on the Carcino Council, is wants to betray Frelia, basically. Pablo is basically kind of running this operation on his own and stamping out everybody who disagrees with him. So, it seems like there is like some room for Carcino to still be on their side, if they just, if they manage to kick out Pablo. And so Inez tells whoever, it's some council guy shows up. What the fuck is this guy's name? Klimt. Apparently his name is Klimt. So yeah, they tell Klimt to go to Frelia and let Hayden know that what's going on. But everybody needs to decide what to do next, because now that Inez is safe, they could go back to Frelia and regroup if they really wanted to. Now that the situation has. Now that they know that traveling through Carcino is going to be dangerous. However, both Eirika and Inez are really concerned about getting to Johanna and Rausten and making sure that those countries are warned about what's going to happen to them. And so they want to press on, but they also know that it's very dangerous to do so. Then who should show up but Ewan? If Tethys is alive, then we find out that Ewan is Tethys's brother. But even if she's not around, he does show up, and I don't know what he's doing here. I guess he was maybe traveling with Tethys. That seems to be the implication in their conversation if Tethys is alive. However, he shows up and says, hey, I know a way to get through the mountains. You can go through the mountains without having to go through the rest of Carcino. You can cut through the mountains, and that leads straight down to Johanna. And so they decided to take him up on his offer to guide them. Which leads us into chapter 11, which is called Creeping Darkness. Basically, the setup for this chapter is really simple. They're progressing through the mountains when they come across an old fort, and there are monsters here, and the monsters attack them, so they got to make sure that they fight off the monsters. And this is a Fog of War chapter. Which is never fun, but it's like, it's manageable. Again, the thing about Fog of War in this game is that the enemies are so easy that you don't really get punished super hard for overextending, which is part of what makes them so frustrating in games that are a little bit more challenging. So I don't necessarily mind them in this game for the most part, but I do think that compared to just like regular maps, I tend to like Fog of War maps less, even in this game. The main thing that we want to go out of our way here to do, well, there's a couple of chests, first of all, and the chests have like decent items in them, if I remember correctly. Let me double check. Yeah, there's a secret book, a short spear, a restore staff, and that's it, I think. But the main thing you want to make sure that you do is recruit the 2 recruitable characters. We are finally able to recruit these guys who we've seen a couple of times over the course of the game. La Rochelle and Dazla are here. As we mentioned, Renak has run away and is no longer with them. But so it's just these 2. But they're green units in the center of the map that you got to go and help out. They're able to hold their own for a while. Dazla's pretty strong, and La Rochelle can help out by healing him. So they're not in like immediate danger. You can split your army. You can either go. I like to split my army to go one down the narrow pathway to the bottom on the left, or you can send another group to go up and around through the actual building itself. Whatever floats your boat. There are some pretty strong enemies in this map. There's only a couple, but they can come out of the fog and kill your ass if you're not careful. So it's a little bit more difficult than last time, a little bit more frustrating than the last Fog of War map. So you do got to be a little bit more careful, and I guess just make sure that you're trying to keep your visibility up and stuff like that. I think particularly, I mean, there's a couple like promoted like skeletons, I think, but the main things you got to watch out for. There's a Death Goyle here, and Death Goyles are quite strong. Death Goyles are pretty fucking scary. They're fast, they hit hard, and they can fly. So they're not going to get impeded by terrain or anything like that. Either way, eventually you're going to make yourself. You're going to make your way to the middle, or Eirika's going to make her way to the middle at the very least, so that you can recruit La Rochelle by talking to her with Eirika, and then La Rochelle can talk to Dazla to recruit him. And they join our group. Now, La Rochelle is a pretty interesting unit to talk about because she, unfortunately, is not very good. She is our third staff unit, and somehow she is worse than not only Mulder, but also Natasha. She's still, like, somehow worse than Natasha, who I already gave a hard time over joining so late. But the main thing about La Rochelle that, like, gives her any sort of a niche at all is that she is on a horse, which can be beneficial. She is the only character that you're going to have access to that is a healer from the jump that has access to stabs on horses. You can get there by promoting Natasha into a Valkyrie, for one thing, or you could also promote Lute into a Mage Knight, or I guess Lewin into a Mage Knight if you're using Lewin. But horses with staff access are like a fairly rare commodity in this game, so she could be worth using from that perspective, but at that point you might as well just use Natasha and make her into a Valkyrie. It's not going to make a substantial difference. In fact, you can pretty easily have Natasha promoted by this point if you really wanted to. So, unfortunately, La Rochelle is not very good. However, I am going to be using her again. We got a lot of characters that I'm going to be using in this episode, which I guess makes sense because there's not that many episodes left. But yeah, so we got a whole bunch of characters. Now, I think I can defend La Rochelle pretty easily because she's a very popular character. People really like her. She's very fun. So I definitely think a lot of people go out of their way to use La Rochelle. The main thing that's going to be interesting about La Rochelle for me is that I want her to be my Ivaldi user, not my Latona user. So I'm going to have to make sure that I don't get her to S rank in stabs by accident, which is very possible to do if you're just using her normally, because she gets like D rank late on promotion, I think. So it's going to take her a while to get up to that. I might have to grind for S rank late if nothing else. But I find the visual of her like smiting enemies with Ivaldi to be a very funny concept, which I think a lot of people can relate to. I mean, she talks about it all the time, how she's going to smite evil or whatever the fuck. Oh, I did forget to mention that La Rochelle joins with C stabs, which is the main reason. If she joined with C, then you can make an argument for her being better than Natasha. But unfortunately, no, she joins with D stabs for some fucking reason. I don't know what it was in this game. Maybe this was their way of nerfing Warp? But then why would they give you C stabs on the earliest guy available, and why would they make bishops promote into having C stabs? I don't get it, guys. Why did they do staff users like this in this game? I don't understand. Dazla is a lot more straightforward. He's just a big fuck off axe guy. He's like fine. He's really strong. He hits like a truck, and Berserker is a good class. He gets the crit bonus. The main thing in this game, the main thing about Dazla specifically is that he has only 9 speed at base, which is like, it seems really bad. Honestly, not terrible in this game. That's still going to let him double a lot of enemies because the enemies in this game are really, really, really slow. However, if you actually want to use Dazla and put investment into him, you're going to probably want to give him a speed wing. It is worth mentioning, and this is probably the biggest thing that characters like Dazla, Ross, and Garcia all have going for them, is that the S-rank axe in this game, Garm, gives plus 5 speed when equipped. So they can double a lot of stuff with that extra plus 5 speed. Now, granted, it's not actually super unreasonable for Garrick to get to S rank axes if you use him enough, which you're probably going to be. And then he like goes fucking sicko mode with the +5 speed and doubles like fucking everything. So it's not like, it's not like Garrick doesn't have this argument for going for him, but it does help to salvage a lot of characters. Dusel also benefits from the +5 speed a lot, and he's a pretty realistic candidate for S rank axes also. So that's pretty much all there is to this chapter. Once you get all the chests and recruit the characters, you kind of just hold out until you're able to like bust into the fog. This is the issue with route maps that are Fog of War, in my opinion, because you have to like fucking look around like a blind idiot trying to fucking find where the last enemies are. So I'm not a big fan of I'm not a big fan of route maps in Fog of War at all. Because it can be a pain in the ass to like just wander around looking for that last enemy. It's tedious. It's annoying. After the map, La Rochelle decides that she is going to accompany Eirika directly from now on. We still don't have a good idea of who she is, or we might have a good idea of who she is, but the game hasn't confirmed it to us outright. So we're still waiting on the answer to that question. But she's going to be joining and tagging along with us from here on. We also meet Sala. I believe we continue on through the mountains and meet Sala here. And he's cool. We get a little bit more information about him next time. So I'll hold off on that for now. But he's a cool guy. I can't wait to talk about him, actually, especially in terms of gameplay. It's going to be really fun. However, as everybody is dipping out, Glenn manages to catch up with Eirika. And they have a conversation. Glenn asks her outright, like, hey, did you kill all these people? And Eirika says, no, I didn't. You have my word on that. And he believes her. So he decides to let her go while he goes back to investigate, like, why the hell would Vigard lie about something like this? And so she runs off. However, before he's able to turn around and do anything, Volter shows up. Apparently he's been keeping an eye on Glenn because he's been a little bit suspicious. Probably also because he's a professional hater and has probably been waiting for Glenn to make a move like this for a while now. But he says, like, oh, you're a traitor, so I'm going to kill you. And he does. Volter and Glenn have a little bit of a back and forth, both in terms of dialogue and in terms of battle. But Volter does land a critical hit and kill Glenn. This is, by the way, where we find out that Volter was a member of the Imperial Three alongside Glenn and Dusel. He mentions that here. And then Glenn's guys run off, and Volter's men chase them down, presumably killing them as well. And that's where we leave off. Kind of a grim spot to end on. We don't know the implications of that. We don't know how that's going to affect Cormag. We don't know how that's going to affect the other generals. But we shall see. Okay, that's it for this time. Let's go ahead and get into our map gauntlet. I like Chapter 9. I think Chapter 9 is pretty good. I like the fact that you actually have to hurry to save the houses. I like the way that it encourages you to utilize flying units or Ross potentially if you promoted him into a pirate. I like the implementation of your first promoted enemy there with the sniper. I think it's pretty good overall. Do I like it more than Chapter 6? Probably, yeah. I think that's tough. That could go. I like them for very different reasons. I like that Chapter 6 has a fun back and forth to it, whereas Chapter 9 feels like a headlong rush into the enemy to try to do side objectives and stuff. I like the pace of Chapter 6 a little bit more, I think, but I think the fact that Chapter 9 has side objectives that are a little bit more difficult to achieve, I think makes it a little bit more interesting in my opinion. So I'm going to go ahead and give it to Chapter 9, both for this episode and for the chapters that we've seen so far. Okay. Now, moving on to news, and there is one really big piece of news that we have to cover. I did discuss this I didn't discuss it. I quote retweeted it on Blue Sky or whatever. And it is the fact that Path of Radiance is coming to the Nintendo Switch Online subscription service because they are introducing GameCube games. And Path of Radiance is one of the ones that they showed off in a little reel of a bunch of games going by. Now this is noteworthy. I've mentioned other Fire Emblem games coming to NSO before. I mentioned when 7 came to the US NSO. I mentioned 6 coming to to the Japanese NSO. So like this is something I've covered in the past. But the biggest thing about Path of Radiance, if you know anything about Path of Radiance, it's the fact that it's extremely difficult to get your hands on these days. It's really really rare. Let me just go look at eBay for a copy of Path of Radiance right now and see what I can find. Yeah, so on the low end, I'm seeing like $170. I'm seeing $230, $215, $150 for just the case, $200. Like these this game goes for a lot of fucking money. I wouldn't be surprised if these prices actually started to go down once it got revealed that it was coming to NSO. It might that the turnaround on that might not be fast enough for that to be realistic. But I wouldn't be surprised if we started to see them go down in the future as demand just starts to go down, right? Because it's not something that everybody's going to want anymore. Of course, if you are buying it's not exactly cost efficient to buy a Switch 2, obviously, but it's not, it's not exorbitantly more expensive either to buy Nintendo Switch 2 and the online subscription. I assume GameCube games are going to be Switch 2 only. I think that would make sense. I don't know if they'd be able to run on fucking Switch. They definitely would. I don't know if they would like bother though. Let me see. Let me look into that for a minute. Yeah, okay. It seems like they're coming to the Switch 2 only, which does make sense. I mean, it's shitty. I don't like it, but it makes sense. With how everything is going right now, the Switch 2 might end up being even more expensive. We just found out the other day, at the time I'm recording this, that that Nintendo is pausing pre-orders in the United States. So fuck us, I guess. I get why. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, it's looking pretty dire for the Nintendo Switch 2 right now. However, if you do get your hands on one and you feel like paying for a subscription to Nintendo Switch Online, which now I feel like is probably pretty worth it. For the most part, it's like $50 I think for a year, or less if you're doing the family plan. So that sort of makes sense. Because now you have GameCube games, you have N64 games, you have GBA games, Genesis, I guess, if you really want to play Genesis games. So yeah, it's probably worth it if you feel like spending the money. Of course, if you are an emulation chad like me, then you just pirate all the games anyway. So it's still not worth it, but for a lot of people, that's just not an accessible option. So I understand why people might want to spend it for that reason alone. And that's all there is in terms of news. But it's still pretty cool. I like that, Path of Radiance is becoming more accessible to people. That's pretty good. Radiant Dawn's still in the dirt, which is a shame. I think that's even more expensive than Path of Radiance. I'm not going to bother to check it right now, but I'm pretty sure it's like in the $200 to $300 range, but could be wrong. Okay, and then I haven't really been doing too much. I've been watching a little bit more Yu-Gi-Oh! I've been watching a little bit more Gundam. I started the Gundam's OVA series called Stardust Memory. That's been really good so far. I've been really enjoying that, but I'm only a few episodes in. I've started playing Kirby Planet Robobot, so that's pretty fun. I've been enjoying that. I'm like 2 worlds in, maybe like a couple levels into the third one. I like Kirby, and I haven't actually played that many of the games, despite my namesake. So I will report back on how that goes. But that's about it so far. Pretty low number of games that I've gotten to this year so far. But we'll see. Hopefully, I can update that more as the year goes on. Right now, I'm only at 8, which is still like a pretty good amount considering we're only about a quarter of the way through the year. That's not too bad. All right, I believe that is all that I have for you guys today. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Make sure to respond to the question about which route you took first, Eirika route or Ephraim route. And I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.